1, 2, 3, okay. Доброго вечора, good evening. Welcome to the Shevchenko Scientific Society. Every year, before Christmas, we have an excellent tradition of poetry reading. Why poetry? It's a hard question. Because in my opinion, poetry is everywhere and poetry is everything. Many years ago, the famous Polish poet Wisława Szymborska said, "Someone loves poetry, but we need to struggle for each reader." I will invite Virlana Tkacz, director and founder of Yara Arts Group, who also is a beautiful poet, to host this evening. I hope your time will be not be wasted. Thank you.
Okay, well, I brought my bell because how do you start an evening without a bell, right? So usually we say, welcome to, I'll say this today, Yara Arts Group. And today we're not at La Mama. For the first time, we're going to be officially ringing the bell here at Entisha, Naukowe Towarzystwo Shevchenko. So, witamy. Okay, so Yara is dedicated to poetry, and each of our theater pieces has a poem at the heart. And we also do a number of live poetry readings, bilingual poetry readings, poetry performances, music to poetry, jazz to poetry, paintings to poetry. We've done entire festivals inspired by a poem. And some of my favorite poems are written by Olena Jennings. And she will be our first reader because we're going to go in alphabetical order because that's just plain fair. So, Olena Jennings, please welcome.
Thank you, Virlana. Thank you, Vasyl, and thank you to Entisha. The first poem I'll read today is called American Morning. My mother cooked from a space inside, pressed together with the hot air of borscht, looking for lives in beet-reddened newspapers, looking for our lives against the backdrop of the bell. A man's hands wrapped around the rope, the echo in our chests and the incense wafting towards us, digging my fingers into the soft varnish of the pew, pretending I am in the back garden, soil beneath my nails, on our knees before cucumbers, wiping prickly skin, tempted, the raspberries failed. They weren't part of our pasts. I could only find one. We tried to push our way into the future, fruit breaking from solitude, the cucumbers in the middle seat of the Oldsmobile, as we took a wrong turn, blinded by the sun. And now I'll read two poems about flowers and honey. The first one is called Poppies. Red and blue on the dresser, dust in the folds, stretching towards the dim lamp. Click of lipstick cap, spritz of perfume, snap of clutch, and she will turn the light off. The flowers will wither into their dreams, and I will put my lips into their centers, ready to blow away pollen, the yellow dust caught in my eyes. When I see for a moment from her perspective, I look out onto the yard. I see myself throwing a rubber ball into the flowers, crushing their petals, the place where I convinced my brother there was a snake, that there was something to fear. To make up for my deception, I gave him one of the plastic flowers, deceiving him again, pretending I bought it at the corner gas station from which we had collected all of our dishes, with the points we got from pumping gas. I want to make up more than that now, absences when I would become like that yellow dust, a quiet star. Honey. That summer we walked out of the park which had contained our imaginations for so long. Our palms and the back of our knees sweaty, the reeds swaying goodbye, the turquoise kiddie pool almost dry. We went to the farmer's market where he taught me about gladiolas that shone with their bright colors. Of course, I chose yellow, the color of the honeybee. He bought a gallon of honey. We tasted the samples given to us on wooden tongue depressors. As we stood, my nose turned red with the sun. My grandfather didn't think of sunscreen and straw hats. What would we do with that much sweetness? I learned to love it and pulled the glass jar from the pantry shelf. It tumbled and the crack resembled a broken heart. From that moment, it was always in our tea, and we emanated sweetness. In school, sugar broke from my skin, and I went to the nurse's office where she called my parents, who sent my grandfather to pick me up. He had the diagnosis, but it was our secret. The jar fell from my hands, and now we were turning into a confectionery, that and my other sins. And the next poem is The Fixer-Upper. They bought a house too soon in a neglected part of town. It was full of odd color choices, sea green walls, and black carpeting in the kitchen. They had a roommate, a lanky man who sat in the yard smoking when he wasn't working at the auto body shop, repairing heating and cooling systems. He had a bedroom on the first floor, but I couldn't imagine him sleeping. He always had dark circles beneath his eyes, reflections of the moon that captured attention. He showed me the photos of his family on the fridge, standing before the backdrop of a dull brick building. His mother had permed her blonde hair, and her dress's vertical stripes made her look taller. His brother was in her arms, blanket hanging down, and his sister balanced on one foot, like a flamingo in her neon skirt. In another photo, they were beneath the lilac tree in the botanical gardens. Their gazes were poised forward. He told me there was a river and a statue built in the spirit of a mother. And just three more. All right. Gardening reprise. My hand deep in the hazelnuts while watching black and white sitcoms. There is always something cocooning, the blanket she knits around my body. Even though it is summer, we can never be warm enough. There is a trickle of sweat on her forehead. She says we have to protect ourselves against history. She taught me about burial, planting the tulip bulbs and covering them with soil, our palms turning a dusty dark. And the next poem is what this whole section is named after, a paper doll album. It's called Paper Dolls. I am sick and I cut the parts that hurt larger. The heart throbs, the room is getting stuffy, but mother is afraid of opening the window. The paper dolls float like snowflakes. Weather finds its way inside. She watches me with the glistening blades of the scissors. The down has traveled to the bottom of my comforter. It isn't warm anymore. My pills are lined up on the nightstand, full moons. I cut dresses and two-piece suits, fold them over the bodies of the dolls. In the mirror, I see my mother's face behind me. She is ready with the cold compress, ready with the thermometer. I am ready with my fever. And the last poem is called A Tiny World. And I actually wrote this for one of the Yara events. A tiny world. the miniature rose the size of a fingernail. We say loneliness until it becomes a feeling, not a word. Slip into the doll's house in our imaginations. The sound of loneliness is my voice bursting like the flowers opening. We are getting used to seeing through a microscope. I see the silhouette of the petal. It matches my face where I have separated myself from emotions. Happiness constructs itself on the slide. Next sadness breaks from my chest, slips heavy. You look and see the jagged edges. You try to mold it into a piece of furniture, but it ends up an icy mirror, the frame your jewelry, the necklace with your name in gold. We are both looking through the microscope and seeing each other. It is no different than the magnifying glass when we channeled the sun. Here we channel the great emotions. We use them to burn the tiny clothes on the slide, the blouse with the pinprick buttons. What we are left with, we learn to live with. Thank you.
Olena Jennings. So we are sort of, I guess, the new New York group here, and we're typical New Yorkers, of course. Christine and I are Jersey girls, and Olena's from Milwaukee, and Vasyl is from Ternopil, right? Typical New Yorkers, right? So the next person to read will be Vasyl, and it is a collaborative project, one could say, because it is by Vasyl, but it is translated by Olena, right? Yeah, a lot of the stuff. So here we are, Vasyl Makhno. Put your hands together.
Thank you, Virlana. I'm gonna start paper bridge. Here's a room, a chair and a bare table. You can carry it on your back or cover it with a manuscript or hide it. Sleep frees me, stop writing. Outside the door, August is ablaze, sand flies into the room. Here's a road, the Long Island Railroad. I choke on the air in my mouth. Somewhere ahead in the earth's edge, Montauk, and the beach is like a manuscript. A world covered with the living and dead seagulls, their nests buried in the sand. Here is a book I'm writing for myself. I write at night, lying in the grass, collecting pages in the morning. I search for the thread or stones or words, the train station, burnt grass. It's all the same, a conductor or customs agent. Here a shadow of the table is carried out, then a chair, and then grass cutting across the floor, walls and concrete, wings rustle, paper crackles. In the seagull's eyes, blue sapphire. In the hawk's eyes, mother of pearl. And you carry your manuscript towards to the train station. Here, the train runs past stones and birds' nests, past letters and pages, to underground wells and celestial rivers, as you build a bridge out of paper. Next poem title is You Have It All. You have bread to sustain you, and the clock of the river on your arm. In the wheat field, rye. In the rye field, wheat. And you have something to go with your bread, the road, the river, the hill, the slope, light for your footsteps, wind for your wings. And what more do you need? Everything else will find you. Your cloak will slip from your arms, and the river will pass you by. And a stone will be your pillow, and the river bank your bed. A comet's tail will be etched upon your brow. And so you have wheat with rye, and you have cabbage and peas? No worries, no sorrow, a key, a door, a lock. So, who took care of you and was so generous? Who pierced the river with the sky and opened the door for you? The next poem, in Paris. If I could take you to Paris, I would be content a mouse in hay. I would give you a streets in Champs-Élysées, the place where Miller met Anne Nin. Paris can sweep you off your feet, land of restaurants, blah blah. Remember your umbrella, in Paris it always rains. And so my plane to Paris take off from JFK. Here the hotel rain cards doesn't smell. Monsieur Jacques, Madame Gigi, everything here is toujours or azure. And so, like a courting peacock, I fan out my tail. A week in Paris, close together in a cafe, reading poems, analyzing metaphors and stanzas. Here, Garcia Marquez, and here Neruda, kissing chapped lips in happiness, buying Turkish plums at the market. That lost generation, Gertrude sign. To be jealous of the look the server gives you, to embrace you and safeguard your sleep, and share life with you, and an orange, to open the window and grab the sleeping comforter, to ask what time is your plane, and to ask, are you crying? To be silent in the morning and wander Paris in the afternoon, to know you will leave our Paris today, and suddenly, out of the blue, I have one day more, a mix-up with the tickets. And when I order a cup of coffee, Pablo smiles at me. And two last poems in both languages. I will be read in Ukrainian, and my translator, Olena Jennings, I will be read in English. Okay, first poem, Одна. І можна на Ісла Негра, а можна на білій яхті жити, повітря проламується яма на ямі. І та, що мене любила, і та, що тепер не любить, і та, що спільне майно від мене відсудить, і та, що любила музику, і та, що вдавала музу, і та, у якої погляд зеленої кукурудзи, і та, що мене хотіла, і та, що мене дурила, і та, що вночі вставала, і цілу ніч курила, і та, що казала не знаю, і та, що уникла шлюбу, і та, що носила кітеля, потім лисячу шубу, і та, що мені годила, і та, що мене тримала, і та, що тепер поїде 8 швидким трамваєм, і та, на губі якої ще молоко не обсохло, і та, яку бачив на Гринич, і та, яку бачив на Сого, і та, що казала приїде, і не була в Белграді, і та, яку як монетку я залишив в Гранаді, і та, котра мала квартиру, але не мала щастя, казала, що сповідається, але казала не часто, і та, що писала вірші, і та, що співала в барі, і та, що мені ніколи не пасувала до пари, і та, що слухала Коена, а інша любила кіна, і та, що кричала, ще приповзеш на колінах, і та, що мене забула, і та, що вже померла, і та, що була медом, а потім щорніла, як мерва. І можна в старечому домі, а можна у віршах, яма над головою, і під ногами ширшає, і ті, що колись любила, і ті, що садила квіти, і ті, що дивилась на тебе, які в неї будуть діти, і ті, що тебе просила, і ті, що тебе прогнала, і ті, що на колінах книжку твою тримала. А ти, що любив ту, а ті ось морочив голову, і ти, що комусь говорив, що помираєш з голоду, і ти, що дощем чи звуками в снігах, у бускових запахах, коли тіло твоє любов'ю глюкози прокапали, подумав кінець, ну дійшов ти вже до дна. Хто стане тобі в головах? І хто вона та одна?
The one. And maybe we can live on Isla Negra on a white yacht. The air shatters, a chasm within a chasm, and the one who loved me and the one who doesn't anymore, and the one who'll sue me over common property, and the one who liked music and the one who stifled my muse, and the one who has the gaze of green corn, and the one who wanted me and the one who betrayed me, and the one who got up and smoked all night, and the one who said she wasn't sure and avoided matrimony, and the one who wore a uniform and then a fox fur, and the one who pleased me, and the one who held me, and the one who will now take the number 8 express tram, and the one on whose lips the milk has not yet dried, and the one who I saw in Greenwich Village, and the one I saw in Soho, and the one who said she'd come and never made it to Belgrade, and the one who I left like a coin in Granada, and the one who had an apartment but was unlucky, and said she was hopeful, but not often, and the one who wrote poems, and the one who sang in a bar, and the one who wasn't at all right for me, and the one who listened to Cohen, and the other who liked films, and the one who yelled, "You'll crawl back to me on your knees," and the one who forgot about me, and the one who already died, and the one who was like honey and then turned rotten. And it's possible in old folks' homes, or maybe in poems, to have a grave before you and the ground opening up beneath your feet. For the one who loved you once, and for the one who planted flowers, and for the one who looked at you, what would her kids be like? And for the one who asked you, and for the one who rejected you, and for the one who held your book in her lap. And what about the one you loved? You upset her, and you told someone that you were dying of desire, and you, in the lilac scents of rain or the sounds of snow, when your body was infused with love's glucose drip, you thought, it's the end. You've reached bottom. Who will be the one on your mind?
Дякую, thank you. And last poem, різдвяний вірш. Не проспали б волхви, не змигнули б звізду, ту, що каже тобі, я тебе приведу, золота, наче пряник на згуслім меду, золота, як кориця. Я кажу їй, веди, серце риби й плавник, узувайся в сандалі чи мій черевик, хоч з верблюжої шерсті одежа на них і кришталь замість серця. А в базарських снігах пан господар Василь моїм серцем дитячим пшеницю косив і водив по оборі без жодних зусиль, і по снігах свою челядь. Я кажу, що я звідси, що серце скрижин, я прохухав у шибці, під шкіру зашив, я волхвів ще вчора самих залишив при шатрі, при вечері. Світло бризнуло їм молоком верблюдиць. Я кажу, що я нині й сам заблудився, за зіницею зірки, від якої збудився, прочинялися двері. Я лежав в серці риби тонким плавником, янгол злизував губи своїм язиком, затуляючи очі прозорим крилом і нитками з паперу. В путці шерсти, верблюжі діоптрі звізди, і розсунуті межі, срібло води, пастухи і рибалки, слова і роди, рукописні і книжні, княжих шатер, дірявий, тугий оксамит, в геометрії світла, крім ліній самих, підсувались верблюди, поближче самиць, залишалися тижні. Залишались сніги, і мій плавник, як кермо, моє серце на нитці гуділо само, серце риби в повітрі лишало клеймо, пучку світла верблюжу, зірка та, що веде, каже, йдем на раз-два, щоби нас пригорнуло світло різдва, що тримає в зіниці вола і волхва, смерть твою і душу.
Christmas poem. The Magi would not oversleep. They would not miss the star, the one that said, I will guide you. golden like gingerbread with thickened honey, golden like cinnamon. I say to the star, guide the heart of the fish and its fin, put on some sandals or my shoes, even though they wore camel skins and had a crystal instead of a heart. But in the village snows, the landowner, Master Vasyl, harvested wheat with his childish heart, and without any effort drove his servants to work in his fields in the snow. I say, I am from here. My heart is ice. I breathed on the icy window, sewed it beneath my skin, and yesterday I left the Magi alone in a tent during dinner. The light sprinkled them with camel's milk. I say, today I am lost, and behind the star that awakened me, the door opened. I lay in the heart of a fish with a skinny fin. An angel licked her lips, covering her eyes with transparent wings and paper fibers. In a tuft of camel hair, a star's diopter, shifting boundaries and the shimmer of water, shepherds and fishermen, words and births, manuscripts and books, a princely tent of tight, ragged velvet in geometric light between the lines. The camels moved closer to the females. Weeks remained. The snows remained, and my fin was a tiller. My heart on a string hummed alone, the heart of the fish like a stigma in the air, a tuft of camel light. The guiding star said, step, 1, 2, so the light of Christmas may envelop us, holding in its gaze the ox and the magi, your death and your soul.
Okay, thank you, Olena and Vasyl. And another round of applause for the two. When I suggested that we go in alphabetical order, I always assume I'm going to be last because TK, I mean, come on. But this time around, I'm not. We got a TU coming up yet. So I'm going to read from my latest book, actually, Lie. It is my only book of poetry. And it just came out, or actually came out last spring, but I haven't really read much from it. And it's called 3 Wooden Trunks, and they are actually 3 wooden trunks that sit in my bedroom these days. It is... I wrote most of these poems during the lockdown, during the pandemic, when I, who work in theater and grew up in a big family and am used to having lots of people around all the time, suddenly was confronted with the fact that I was living with 3 wooden trunks, 12 cups, 6 spoons, et cetera, and these were going to be my companions for the next several years, it turned out. And they all had a story, and I started writing them down. And so the very first poem in this collection is called, the very first section is called New York Land. New Yorkshire, I guess, and it is about my mother and her family and their arrival. And the first poem is called The First Day. My mother arrived in New York on May 18th, 1949, with her parents and 3 large wooden trunks, addressed to 104 East 7th Street, care of H. Helite, their sponsor, who missed them or forgot to meet them. After several hours of back and forth at the dock, the porter offered to sign their sponsorship papers. Mother said he was the first New Yorker she met. He was kind and he was black. She had a single $1 in her pocket. He told her to change it into dimes and take the subway to the East Village. Mr. Halite was not home. The other address Mother had was for her brother, George, who lived on Avenue C near 8th Street in a 5th floor walk-up. They knew George was out of town. He had left keys with his neighbors, just in case. Mom ran up and down the 5 flights several times before she realized keys in this city went into keyholes upside down. Welcome to New York. She was 20 years old. First job. Can you sew? You majored in languages, but you froze. What should you say? Can you thread a needle? You nodded. Can you hem a skirt? You nodded. Then you can sew. Where are you from? Again, the question was so big, where to begin? From Europe? Yes, Europe. You speak English? Yes. Good. These American girls never held a needle. What's your name? Alexandra. Well, Alexandra, you start tomorrow morning. When? When I call you. We don't have a telephone. Oh, don't worry, you'll hear me. Tina Dressoli was an opera singer who had, quote-unquote, lost her voice. But every morning, her Alexandra shook the building and resonated through the neighborhood. She was an exacting boss with a good heart. She paid 80 cents an hour when the minimum was 75. Tina loved the opera for its music and its spectacle, especially the costumes. When she lost her voice, she started making extravagant dresses. She found brides too unhinged. She preferred her drama on stage. So her dress shop specialized in wedding party dresses, for the bridesmaids, the mothers. How many girls did you watch trying to squeeze into their dream size? How many buttons had to be moved? How many seams ripped and restitched? How many miles of tulle, lace, and organza passed through your hands? The first thing you bought with your first paycheck was a dress. Not fancy, but flattering. 70 years later, it's still hung in your closet in a basement in New Jersey. Now, here's one for the home team. Kos Kisielewski. Job 1. Soon after he arrived in New York, my grandfather went to work for the NTSA, or the Shevchenko Scientific Society. It was Ukraine's independent scholarly society before there was an independent Ukraine. Established in Lviv in the days of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, it had survived under Poland, but was dissolved when the Soviets invaded Lviv in 1939. The moving force behind NTSA New York was Mykola Chubati, a historian who came to New York in 1939 for a conference at Fordham, and of course the World's Fair. He was here when the war broke out, and he stayed. After the war, he founded NTSA. Professor Chubati had studied in Vienna, so had my grandfather, who graduated in 1912 with a diploma signed by Franz Josef, the Emperor. Job 2. In July 1949, my grandfather also organized the New York Ukrainian School. It was the first summer after they arrived. Other schools were on holidays, so the new arrivals didn't know what to do with their children while they worked. So they sent their children to Ukrainian school. Little did they realize that because of this, generations and generations of Ukrainian American children would miss Heckle and Jekyll and the rest of the Saturday morning cartoon lineup. This is also why we all still speak Ukrainian. Now, neither job my grandfather had really paid. And the second section sort of starts off with me, and it's called Imported from Newark. And that's because whenever I'm introduced, whenever I say my name, Virlana Tkacz, and people say, "Oh, where are you from?" And I say, "Newark." So that's where I'm imported from. Okay, let's see. Oh, yeah, this is okay. This one's called Marcia Verne. We sat one in front of the other thanks to the alphabet for a couple of years before one day I turned to Marcia Verne and asked her in my careful Ukrainian English if I could walk home with her. We lived on the same block, but worlds apart. We sat worlds apart in the same classroom, where I chatted with my friends, but she only understood American. Our uniforms gave us the same look, but she carried her books on her hip, fastened with a turquoise rubber band, while I lugged mine in a brown leather bag my mom got in some old country over there. Marcia looked at me surprised, and she asked if I liked Mickey Mantle. I checked out her eyes and solemnly nodded yes. But I had no idea who Mickey Mantle was. I had no idea Mickey Mantle was even a name. And I nodded all the way home that day as she chatted on and on about home runs, bases, and fouls. And I was still nodding when we stood in our doorway, and she said she knew we'd always be friends. That night, I repeated all those words, all those wonderful words, wondering what they meant. But I never imagined they were intimately connected to that fat stick Big Eddie held as he chased me down the block just for the heck of it. Okay. Oh, well, this is a good one. Sfogliatelle. Today, I live on the block with Vignero's, an Italian pastry shop that has international awards in the window and long lines, especially before any holiday. That's where I always take first-time visitors for coffee and pastry. They are amazed and want to know, how do I do it? What? How you manage to resist? I tell them I never really liked sweets. Oh, I buy cakes for birthdays here and cookies for long, hard meetings. But the only pastries I really enjoy are the sfogliatelle, and I like to savor those. I remember walking down South Orange Avenue in Newark to Cafe Roma's. As Dad waited in line, the shapes and the wild colors of the sweets on display glued me to the glass. When our turn came, Dad picked out a plain clamshell. You just wait, he said, and closed my dropped jaw. We sat down at a perfect pink table. The smell of the coffee was intoxicating. The waitress sat down the tray. She placed a frothy glass of warm milk in front of me, then set the tiniest cup with espresso in front of my dad. In the center, she placed the clamshell, looking pretty much the same, plain. It looked hard to get at, so I wasn't going to make the first move. To my surprise, Dad picked it up with his hands and pulled it apart. Crusty circles of layered pastry with some secret baked-in filling saturated the senses. The candy bits were a textural surprise. I sipped on the milk. Bubbles tickled my nose. So, not too sweet, not too plain, simply just right. Endangered Language Project. Today, I realized I'm an endangered language project conducted by my mom and all the other Jersey moms who knew Ukrainian wouldn't exist if it wasn't the rule at home every day and power charged with an extra full day of school on Saturday. In my time, Ukrainian school was no joke. This is what you really had to cram for, with reading lists of hundreds of books, many of them out of print since the 20s. The precious copies crumbled in our hands as we passed them from teen to teen in handmade paper covers. Austro-Hungarian educational precepts of tough written and oral exams ruled in Newark, where most of my teachers had PhDs but cleaned offices during the week. This is where I first heard of Virgil's Aeneid. Kotlяревski had written a travesty in 1794, and you had to be able to compare it to the Roman source. We had to discuss the dreaded Black Council Chronicle of the year 1663 by Pantaleon Kulish, a book I managed to skip thanks to the Cliff Notes version my grandfather put together. We learned about Impressionism because of Kuchubinsky and Modernism because of Ticino. And I hid my tears when Mrs. Kolenska read out loud the writers of the executed Renaissance. Writing was a dangerous profession, and so was speaking Ukrainian. And weren't we lucky we could do both, and only had to survive the jeers of our neighbors, and the silence from the home country, the silence and the insistence that we did not exist. Okay, and sort of on the same topic, but different. And this is from way later. This one's called Pursued by a Poem. Help. I'm all wet. My t-shirt's totally soaked, and so is my underwear. My heart is beating so fast, and I'm having a hard time breathing. My forehead is hot, my hands are cold and red. Let's not get into any part of that cursed book. I glance down as I type this, and one of my hands is definitely red. I should call EMS. But what am I going to tell them? I'm being pursued by a poem. Not just any old poem, but the song of Igor's campaign, which we all learned in Ukrainian school is an 11th century epic. I feel terrible. I feel this bad last night too, after I spent several hours reading a very scholarly tome that claims this epic is a forgery by a Czech abbot, written from 1792 to 1798. Here, I thought I was having the flu, compounded by jet lag, feeling worse in the middle of the night instead of the afternoon, but I've been cursed by a mad monk, and I've got the bubonic plague. Or maybe I've been cursed by all the folks who believed in this epic and spent an ocean of ink writing about it, as the author so elegantly put it. One of my professors warned me about staying away from this topic, saying that no matter what side of the fence I wound up on, I would be hated by all. I didn't really know what he was talking about, since I never delved into the topic. However, my dear grandfather wrote a very long article on this epic, right after he came to America. We discovered it with my mom when we were going through his papers last spring. I definitely should not call my mom right now. I'm not sure what would she find more upsetting, the fact that I'm dying, or that I would somehow tarnish my grandfather's memory for more than 1 second agreeing with this renowned scholar. If anything horrible happened to that man, I beg you, don't call me and tell me about it. I tried telling a few people about my experiences last night, but that was before I really put it all together. I called Bob Holman a poet. Nothing like going to the source. I told him I felt terrible since I'd been back, like someone had beaten me with a stick. He had a poker game at his house, and of course couldn't talk. And what am I going to tell him? This is not something I could explain in less than 30 seconds. An intern came over and took some pictures from our shows for a brochure he is to design. He, like most Americans, probably couldn't find Ukraine on a map if his life depended on it. And what am I going to tell him? That what I thought was our great national epic, but the Russians say is their great national epic, is actually a forgery by a mad Czech monk who was hoping to please Catherine the Great? If I were him, I would definitely think my advisor's a raving lunatic and would think twice about getting involved with our theater company. Thank God I am going to Central Mozambique next week. I know I will go to Chief Tamburara's. I will sit on one of those little folding chairs he brings out for guests and simply say, "Please help. I'm being pursued by a poem." He'll look me in the eye and say, "A poem?" Then he will cough his smoker's cough, just like my dad, and he will definitely know what to do next. And then one of the final sections of this book is called Packing It Up, and it's sort of my mom, we started packing up the house. And this one's called Mint Chocolate Chip. Late on a Sunday night, Mom and I are still up. I open the freezer door for relief. There are 6 large containers of ice cream. Black raspberry coffee, strawberry vanilla and chocolate, cherry vanilla, and mint chocolate chip. I pull out the mint and get 2 spoons. Why wash dishes this late? Mom wanders in. Why is the ice cream green? It's mint chocolate chip. I never had that before. Can this possibly be true? Can mint chocolate chip be foreign territory to my mom, just like broccoli and peanut butter, which we never ate as kids, growing up in Jersey because she didn't know what they were? No, wait. I remember having mint chocolate chip ice cream when I was real little, at the dairy farm, halfway to the bungalow on the Delaware. You can get 2 flavors on 1 cone. The big decision was which should go on the bottom. Which flavor did you want to last in your mouth the rest of the long drive? This is not bad, Mom says, but doesn't remember the dairy farm or the bungalow. I lick my spoon and remember the mint peppermint patties Grandma Belansky hid for us behind the little wooden door of her icebox in the black bar she ran in the big house. I remember waving to the train as it slowed down going past the old house. We would run across the front lawn waving wildly. On a great day, the engineer would wave back and toot the horn. Summers never ended. There were long walks down to the river, past the poison ivy, to the platform my Dad built with his friends so we could dive into the lazy curves of the Delaware as it spread out over the rounded stones we collected on the silk banks. But most of all, I remember the lone dog barking on a roof of a house that floated by. When this river showed us its might, I stood with my mom high on a hill as my brother screamed, stung by a bee. We watched the river rise, but I knew my dad would come and rescue us. I don't ask my mom if she remembers any of this now. Tonight, let's just stick to mint chocolate chip ice cream. Thank you. And of course, the final reader will be Christina Turczyn.
First, I want to say that I'm very honored to be here, and thank you very much to Virlana and Yara and Olena for working tirelessly with me on this book. This is my first one in the Poets of Queens, so I'm very, very happy and honored to be here. The first poem is about my mother's recollections of the Second World War, pretty much as a 5-year-old leaving Ukraine. So this is taken from some of her impressions during the bombing, and it's called Gravity. I feel that language should never be an escape. It is what you need to dig out of the rubble of your body. It is the earth of your body bearing witness to devastation. It is all you have when others come to ask what is happening here. It is not a matter of posturing, not a matter of shifting a few polite stones. No, every time you pull up the earth, you pull up roots, gravity, gathering dust, the memory of water, dirt. This is the way it is. Then again, I never witnessed a bombing what children call the Christmas tree, because there were so many lights that roofs were blown off houses, and so much ruin that villages burned down to their very roots. The second poem is a poem called Accident. I had a very long time ago worked with someone who was in a very terrible accident and had to be actually escorted from room to room every day because he couldn't remember where the classes were located, but was one of the best poets that I've ever met. You startle me with your brilliance. You speak in poems not because you want to, but because your memory fails. Near an abandoned prison, deer fenced off, run in herds for generations, blood banging with the red wildness of grief. You read Thoreau and Dickinson, Sartre and Rich, each page rendering the one before it blank. Yet words about healing imprint themselves beneath your skin, bare bones of leaves, pale phosphorescent stems. Tell me how it is I can help you, angry bang of entropic wisdom, beeper in your pocket, hungry for joy. Who will rescue your anger from riptides of loss? Who will match your sandy phrases with eroded recollection? Who will run with you head on, because youth does not walk no matter how far there is to go? Listen to me, the world is full of hunters. Be careful still. Rise in your lived strength in the way you give birth to yourself daily, in the way you wait and wait until all thorns fall from your voice. How do they know what it is to wait until names sift down through your hands, a few grains of light at the ocean's bed? What are grades in the face of hunger? What are words in the face of survival of trust? Not the utterings of connoisseurs, but what we use to summon our lost children, or the bread we feed to shadows that come home from war. I tell you, take your time until the world slows down, until intelligence is measured by a love of the sea, until dissident is not a ruler's hunted twin. Take your time, observe a cloud's slow breathing, read rivers on a woman's aged face, offer water, be careful, do not swallow stones, then teach me how to write as though there were only 5 arrows left. The last poem is called Social Distancing. My mother had dementia. She passed away, but I was really struck by the way that, in a way, our memories are freed, the less we can remember. So she started talking about her history, and this is a poem that I wrote about that and her recollections of the Second World War as well. Social distancing. I make a decision to wear a mask when leaving my home, because I'm at risk and my mother is dying. She has dementia and does not yet know this, how easy it is to create the other. All storms are necessary. Without them, we would not recognize our stories. I had to tell her this 6 months ago, but she forgot. It is better that way. It's better to live a daily erasure than to have time etched onto your skin. Here, a cloud gets snagged on a thorn. Do you remember the day, she asks. You have 6 months to live, the hospital staff told her, and I do not know how one can stand that finality, the feigned precision, the grief. As a child, she sustained a blitzkrieg in a farmer's basement. The town was called the Village of the Crown. How ironic. Yet at 87, she returns in her mind to the city of the Swan, recalling how she could not attend school there, but ran along the riverbank while American soldiers threw their lassos to the wind. How easy to be caught, how difficult to let go. Once before an air raid, my mother stood in the window of a toy store, just wishing to reach for that doll. On another day, she played with children in a field just before the shadows of plains overtook them and strafed hills to the right and left as they lay face down on the earth. Are stones necessary? Is silence a form of propaganda of stone hurled at the unfamiliar lake because it is unfathomable? I think about silence, how easy it is to create another, not even the amount of time it takes to pull on a mask. Just last Sunday, I wore mine to the farmer's market. A stranger saw me, pulled up his scarf, and averted his face, as though I were the illness and the cause. It doesn't take much. Put a stone in a child's hand and tell him who the enemy is. Put silence in a child's vocabulary and see if he ever asks for anything again. Who lives? Who decides? Who dies? Asking is being alive. Hunger lives at the center of that lake, the innermost heart where the stone is lost. What would we dive in for after all, if not for that one submerged life? Was it there that the three men drowned? They were on vacation, partying, and didn't know how unforgiving that lake might be. Was it the golden fern I looked for in those woods, the fern that flowered only for those who saw? And where was the good after my mother boarded that train with my grandmother as the soldier walked past them, threw their suitcase out? Could one believe in anything after that? Yet my grandmother smoked and read, helped others escape, the school, the wounds. Anna painted a railroad tie that stretched across her hand. Give a child an ideology and it might masquerade as rainbow for a time until she confronts its texture, stained smiling glass. Then how should she walk to the other side of the world without breaking? The man who turns away in the aisle, it's the look that startles, how quickly I am made foreign. Did I ever talk to those three men before they drowned? Did I pass them unknowingly during a summer's walk? Who found the books in the church cupola where my father hid them, 50 years after his village burned? Did a stranger write a dedication for someone he fell in love with, someone who died in resistance? Once I received a prayer mat and used it. How I loved you those days in the Hudson Valley. How you thought of the universe as a swing and how we found it one day, water flowing upward on Peace Road. These days I take walks and photograph a bright green lawn. I believe the branches on the ground are my feelings, but I don't want to bend. Deer cross the road one by one. We are not in the present, we are not in the past. My grandmother's suitcase is trapped in midair, but the train moves on. After years, I visit a museum. The work is there, an image of her hand, the rails, the wood. It is the wood we carry within. My father never saw his father again. Today they meet in a field where there are no bombs, and his father says, "Go now, I have other children to protect." In my dream, my father's youthful lover was deported but returns. I rode in that same weathered boat. Somewhere the sky breathes. 3 children escape. Later, 3 daughters die of silence. My grandmother smokes. Circles walk on the air. Passaic gets its first ice skating rink. No one skates, yet donations arrive. No one drowns. Okay, I'll just read one more, I think. This one is an older poem. It's called You Are. You speak at the level of bone. You are political. You know the growing poem in a woman's throat is not far from her silence, thick as it becomes, with rape in wartime, buried manuscripts in her reign. You are in the place where a woman is. Her shadow fits her body, and her shadow arm is yours. Whenever she moves, you move. Whenever she dreams you, you exist. You are political. You read her body's letters without claiming them. You know there is no owning another's voice. There is no speaking a foreign language unless you have loved in that language, unless you've made it familiar. By accepting the one untranslatable word that will never be yours, but the grain around which your life will grow. You are political. You hear the voice of sand, the sand of forgotten languages. Without exposing her pain, you recover woman's history. You stand inside her silence like slow music darkening. Thank you.
Christine. And that concludes our poetry session. That is just the beginning of the poetry experience for many of you, hopefully, because we have all the books that were read that you got a sort of sampling of, and they're all for sale, and they're not very expensive, so they make great Christmas presents that you can also enjoy at home by yourself. And also, I want to congratulate all our poets, for reading these poems in front of the man. Because although Shevchenko might not have been a scientist, as far as I know, he certainly was one hell of a poet. So, to the new poets, a big hand. So, and also you can get your book signed by the poet.
Thank you for all participants. Thank you for coming at Shevchenko Scientific Society. On the third floor we have a reception, and the next event in our society will be in December 14, Saturday. 70, oh, I'm so sorry. 70, yes, it's a very interesting topic. It's a round table about Ukrainian nationalism. Invite all to be here. Thank you very much. Good night.